Greetings from Tokyo, my friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope all of you are doing very well today. If you don't mind, I would like to speak to you about a film, which is a documentary. And it is a documentary by a filmmaker that I admire very much. And he is a filmmaker that has done a lot of very important work and very captivating work in terms of mainly documentaries, although he has done some fiction film work. And he is Japanese, and he is a very important voice. I would say one of the most important voices in Japanese cinema. And therefore, I would very much appreciate it if you would join me in talking about this film. The film is by Kazuo Hara, and the film is called, in Japanese, Sayonara CP, or in English, Goodbye CP. This was released in 1972, and it's a documentary about essentially a group of Japanese people who are being shot in various situations around Yokohama and also in Tokyo. And they have cerebral palsy, which is the CP of the title. And so it's essentially situations depicting, or not depicting, but showing these people and what the people around them, how the people around them react, what they do in order to sort of indicate or illustrate something about their lives and about what it is they experience. And also there are very intimate interviews, I would say, that are made with each of the participants that talk about their feelings when they go out into the public, the kinds of feelings of maybe feeling ostracized, or maybe feeling that they get feelings of pity from the outside world, so to speak. But not only do we get interviews where the subjects talk about their experiences with society, we also get very intimate, candid interviews about sexual experiences, about a home life, and we get very up close in certain instances where we deal with actual fights between a married couple that occurs on camera for a very specific reason. And so this is essentially the film. And this is in 1972, so the early 70s. So this is also, in a sense, a depiction of Japan at this time. Not only do we see the urban environment and how people look upon those who have cerebral palsy as they are in the streets, as some are taking pictures, or they are trying to recite poetry, or they're trying to raise money, collect money, or they're trying to make some kind of statement, or they're trying to do something for the sake of themselves and or for the sake of the film that is being made by Kazuo Hara. So in essence, it is a very, I would say, it's a film with a lot of complications and a lot of contradictions. And I mean that in a very positive way, because this is a film that is incredibly thought-provoking, and also one that is very, I would say, very profound in a way that is itself quite complicated. And I think a mark of a really fundamentally important film is its ability to cause a variety of feelings and a variety of reactions in the viewer, not just a certain reaction of righteousness or pity or something like that, but also a sense of self inspection or introspection, or the idea of the gaze returning to the viewer, and this idea of I am the viewer of this film and I'm looking at the subject matter. So perhaps my act of actually viewing the film gives me this false sense of superiority over the subject matter, and that is in itself an act that should be criticized or should be subject to my own self-criticism. And I think all of these seeming contradictions are at play in this film, and thus I think this film is incredibly fascinating. Goodbye CP. So that is my general sense of the film. It is a documentary, and it is in black and white, and it is in Japanese. So what I have here is I have the Facets video DVD, which was released, I think, in North America some years back. And so I think this is still available through retail sellers like Amazon and the like. And so I would strongly encourage you to look up the works of Kazuo Hara, and in particular look up this film, which is his first documentary film, as I understand it, Goodbye CP. And please try to find this film and please watch it, because I think it should be watched by as many people as possible. Kazuo Hara is, in my view, one of the most important voices in cinema, and he has a very great style, and it's a style that is quite provocative, and it is one that is that has meaning. It is not meant to shock for shock's sake, but it is meant to provoke in a way that would lead to some kind of result. And I think that is the best kind of provocation. And so I would strongly recommend that you look up the works of Kazuo Hara, because his works are, even now, watching them now, are incredibly filled with vitality and energy and a real honesty that I think is very rare in today's cinema. So I would strongly urge you to look up the works of Kazuo Hara, please. And if you want to start from the beginning, so to speak, although this isn't necessarily the start of his artistic career, because Kazuo Hara had a very interesting biography before he actually made this film. So if you're interested in looking up more information about Kazuo Hara, might I recommend this book in English, which is called Camera Obtrusa, The Action Documentaries of Hara Kazuo. In Japanese, the family name comes first and the given name comes second. So that's why his name is mentioned here as Hara Kazuo. Hara is apparently it's his family name, and Kazuo is his given name. But of course, we can switch that when we speak of it in English, although this respects the Japanese order of the names. So Camera Obtrusa, the action documentaries of Hara Kazuo. This is from Kaya Press, and this is from, let's see, just to give you the date here. This is from, this is 1987, copyright 1987 by Hara Kazuo. And this is translated into English, and translation copyright is 2009. And just to give you the translation credits, this is translated by Pat Noonan and Takuo Yasuda. Again, this is from Kaya Press. So I would recommend that you look at this and read this if you can. There are also many essays that can be found online with respect to Kazuo Hara. Might I suggest, as a place to start, although it's very rich, the works of Jeffrey Ruoff and Kenneth Ruoff. I understand that they are professors and they are experts in the films of Kazuo Hara, and also I think in Japanese studies as well, and in particular Japanese film studies. So they have a book called The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On from Flickbooks from 1998. I'm not sure as to the availability of it in print, although I'm sure you can find excerpts or more online if you look hard enough. So this is, again, The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On from Flickbooks in 1998. And there are other pieces and articles and interviews that Professors Ruoff and Ruoff have done on the subject of the films of Kazuo Hara. So I urge you to take a look at those if you can. Okay, so let me just stop there, and I will now go into some detail about this film. So if you are, for whatever reason, if you don't want to hear about any details of this film, I urge you to stop this video now and to watch this film, and then come back to this video at any time. I think please remember the name Kazuo Hara. Again, his name is Kazuo Hara, and also his producer, the producer of the film, and also his his professional and personal companion is a person whose name is an artist and filmmaker and producer, whose name is Sachiko Kobayashi. Again, Sachiko Kobayashi. So Kazuo Hara and Sachiko Kobayashi. Please. I hope it's my sort of my wish is that you remember those names and look up the films that they have made together. They have made a number of films that I think are available in North America, and the ones that I think are most famous, or the ones that I have here from Facets, are, for instance, Extreme Private Eros Love Song 1974, which I will cover in a future video. Then there is The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On, which I will also cover in a future video. Then there's also A Dedicated Life, which I will also cover in a future video. And there are other films as well, which I will also cover in separate videos. So again, Kazuo Hara, Sachiko Kobayashi. And the film that I will be speaking about in a couple moments is Sayonara CP, or Goodbye CP, from 1972. Okay, so you're back. So hopefully that means you've either seen the film or you don't mind a further detailed discussion of this incredibly important film, Goodbye CP. Now, I spoke about this film in terms of contradictions, and there are many contradictions in this film, and I think that is a positive thing. That makes this film an incredible viewing experience. And it's a tough viewing experience too, and I think I mentioned that. It's tough because it makes me feel at once very I'm very moved by what's being shown in this documentary, but I'm also feeling very guilty when I watch this film. And the reason why I feel guilty is because I cannot necessarily deny the possibility that I might react in the same way or in a similar way that the general public, the quote-unquote healthy people, are reacting to these people as they are being presented out in the public, doing or engaging in certain activities, or traveling on trains, or maybe trying to do something out, read poetry in Shinjuku or something like that. And so I can sit here and say that I saw the movie or the documentary, and I saw it and I was very moved by the subjects, Mr. Yokota and Mr. Yokotsuka and others. And I was moved by their sincerity and honesty and their assessments of certain situations that occurred and as were depicted in the film. And I was very taken by their charm, because they're very charming persons and personalities, and they have a very sharp intelligence, and they're very keen observers of the world and the society around them. And so I could say that I was 100% with them, but I think that would not be totally honest, because I can also see the film, which is also very critical of this idea of people giving money to them and putting just 200 yen in the little collection box and showing these feelings of pity, or feigning these feelings of pity, and just putting money in the box and saying, oh, isn't that a shame, or isn't that too bad, and just walking away. And so I think the filmmaker is very critical of that kind of societal or general societal approach towards people with CP, or people with disability. And so with that kind of moment being depicted in this documentary, I think that in a very indirect way, the documentary is being critical of someone like myself, which I think is perfectly legitimate. And that's why I think this film works so well for me, because it makes me feel uncomfortable, and it makes me feel, it knocks me off of my level of comfort. And I need that. I really do need that, because it's really it's really interesting from my point of view to watch a film, right? Because I watch a film from basically the safety and comfort of my own home, my house. I put a disc in a machine, and I push the button, and I press play, and then it shows up on the screen, and I watch in the comfort of my own home. And when I watch the film, I am engaged, I feel moved, I feel sympathetic, and it makes me look at the world in a different way. But if I were to say that, yes, now I completely understand the situation of people like Mr. Yokota and Mr. Yokotsuka and others who have CP, or cerebral palsy, then I think that would be I think I would be intellectually dishonest, and that would just be something for me to say, and then I turn off the TV and I just go on with my life. So I wouldn't be any different from those whom Kazuo Hara is being critical of during that scene of the collecting of money in, I think it's Yokohama. And so I love the film for that. I love the film for showing me my own weakness, and giving me something quite critical of myself to think about. So I appreciate the film for that. But I think that's not the end of the story with this kind of film, because Kazuo Hara, he is very candid about how he approached this film, and that's why I would recommend that you get this book, which I'm so glad it was translated into English, because that means that I think this can be made available to many of you out there who might be interested in the works of Kazuo Hara, but who don't speak Japanese, or maybe cannot read Japanese. There are a number of books and materials in Japanese that one can get, but I think to have this, at least this in English, is very crucial, and I'm very grateful that this has been made available. So I would highly recommend that you get this as well if you are interested in the works of Kazuo Hara, because Kazuo Hara, in his own words, talks about many aspects of the making of this film, and also the background in making this film, and also specific commentary about certain scenes that we see in this film. So this is indeed a very important supplement, I would say, to the film itself. And one of the things that Hara does so remarkably is he is at once depicting Mr. Yokota and Mr. Yokotsuka and others. So Mr. Yokota is the gentleman pictured here, and he's a very intelligent man. He is artistic. He is a poet, and he is talking about the treatment that he gets from society. And he is married, and he has a wife, and he has a child, and the wife is also shown in the film, and the wife is visibly showing her dissatisfaction and unhappiness with the way that Kazuo Hara is apparently treating Mr. Yokota in the course of filming this film. And so we get a very intimate portrait of Mr. Yokota and the situations that he finds himself in at, I think, upon discussing the situation with Mr. Hara. And we get, therefore, scenes of him on a regular train, I think on the way to Shinjuku. And so we see him essentially sitting on the floor. And we also see, I think, Kazuo Hara helping him on his, having him on his back and helping him to a seat on the train. And then also we see Mr. Yokota in a place in Shinjuku, which is a very busy place of Tokyo, and writing on the ground with chalk and writing his name in kanji characters. And I love how the way he writes his name in kanji characters in the reverse order. He starts with the last character of his first name, and then goes with the first character of his first name, and then the last character of his family name, and then the first character of his family name. So I really like that detail. There's a little bit of an artistic sense to that, and I feel like that is an indication of the kind of keen mind that we're dealing with. And he is there, of course, to read his poetry out in public, which is I think a fine endeavor. And as I say, he's a very charming man. I think he has a very strong screen presence, and what happens is that he is stopped by the police, and the police say, who is your guardian? Who's your guardian? And apparently the police take him away, and he is later picked up by Mr. Hara and Ms. Kobayashi. But that is an indication of the kind of situation that Mr. Yokota finds himself in, as depicted in this film. And that scene is actually described in great detail in this book, because what happened was the small crew, just went away for a moment, leaving Mr. Yokota in the street, and he was there writing on the ground and maybe making some kind of proclamation or statement with respect to his poetry or his art. And then some police came, and they basically picked him up and brought him to a nearby makeshift station, a small station where he was brought, and Hara and Kobayashi were told of this, and they went there, and after some discussion, they were allowed to take Mr. Yokota back home. And it's very interesting because after this, it's said that Mr. Yokota was very happy. He was really elated by the experience. And he seemed, according to Mr. Hara on page 86 of this book, he says, after this incident, he says, on the train home, Yokota talked about many things with us. He was really elated. The experience had been great fun for him. He said that because of the action he had performed, he had created a situation that required police intervention, that the whole thing had been a form of self-expression. He seemed so pleased, saying such things that, as I listened to him, I began to disagree. I said, rather coldly, Mr. Yokota, you say these things, but you couldn't even come to the streets of Shinjuku by yourself. We had to carry you on our backs. You say so excitedly that so many people gathered to see you when you started reading poetry, but in fact, they gathered because of the movie camera. Now, this is a description of what happened with respect to a particular moment in this film. So what I read wasn't actually depicted in the film, but this is, in Hara's own words, a description about what happened after a certain scene in this film ended. And so after this, Mr. Hara says that that after this moment, Mr. Yokota seemed no longer willing and able to go on with the film. And so, indeed, after the scene ends rather abruptly, regarding the scene of him in Shinjuku trying to read poetry, the film then cuts to the ending, a very, I think, a very poetic ending, I think, where we see Mr. Yokota alone on the street, and he is without any clothing. And we also see him on the street with clothing and essentially writhing or turning around or doing something on the ground, trying to do something physical on the ground. And so this is, I think for him, a final statement about him and who he is and who he wants to be as portrayed by Mr. Hara's camera in the film. And so I think this is a very emblematic episode because it shows at once Hara's intimacy with his subject, but also it shows the kind of contradiction that I think even Mr. Hara would suggest that he had, because he also explains in the book that he is the one with the camera and he is quote-unquote a healthy one, meaning he does not have a disability. And so he is shooting, or he acknowledges that he is shooting the stuff, the subject matter, from the point of view of the healthy. And so he can't help but have the viewpoint of society or the institution. And therefore, in a very interesting way, even though there are many moments of closeness and intimacy with the subject matter, at the same time, there is a certain distance because the camera is there and the camera is intrusive. And this is perfectly shown in this episode with the poetry, right? Because what Hara suggested to Mr. Yokota was that no one would have surrounded Mr. Yokota had the camera not been there. And so that shows the inherent paradox that we have with this film, which is why it's so complicated and complex, and which is why I think it is an incredibly rich viewing experience. And that is because the camera is at once trying to be intimate with the subject matter, and at the same time, it is intrusive of the subject matter. And I think Mr. Hara very bravely acknowledges that point. And he doesn't end it there, though. He doesn't say, well, this is a dilemma that can't be resolved. No, but he tries to do something with that. And he tries to give us moments of raw and intense intimacy. And there are some moments here that I think are remarkable in that respect. We don't just get the notion of Mr. Yokota and Mr. Yokotsuka, who is the gentleman who has the camera, and who is the gentleman who is trying to take pictures of people in the street. So that's another interesting element there. We are the ones, or Mr. Hara has his camera, and through his camera, I and other viewers of the film are looking at the subject, are looking at the film through the lens of the camera. But Mr. Yokotsuka's camera, as he takes pictures, turns the gaze back on us. And I think that is a very interesting reversal. And it is an indication of what I think the film is asking me to do, which is to turn the attention back around and to myself, and to really inspect and self-inspect, and to criticize and be self-critical of my own role. And I really respect the film for that, and I really admire the film for that, and I need more films like this in my life. But what was I saying before? Oh yes, there are moments where we get really, I would say, very lovely and tender moments. And the moments I'm thinking of in particular are where we get the close-up interviews of these gentlemen, and they're talking about their sexual experiences, and they're very candid, and they're just talking about they're losing their virginity and going to the red light district and having trouble with arousal. And so these, I think, are very, I wouldn't call them comic episodes necessarily, but they're very candid, and I really appreciated it because I feel so close with these men because they're sharing their experiences as men, and there is nothing about their quote-unquote disability. There's nothing there about what it is they are, society deems them to be afflicted with. No, this is just them one-on-one with the camera and just talking about sex. I really found that a wonderful way in which I could relate most strongly with them, because I'm a man too. So I thought that was wonderful. And but at the same time, I have to acknowledge that the film is not just a depiction of the real life cinema verite, getting at the heart of who these men are. No. I think it would be a too saccharine approach, too syrupy an approach to have a film that just dealt with that. These sort of happy episodes, so to speak, for lack of a better word. And so I admire the film for then turning that moment into another means of self-reflection. Again, it is still the camera looking at these people. And so, am I really feeling this moment of intimacy and closeness with these gentlemen, or is it just another thing that I need to further self-examine? Who knows? So this is, for me, a profoundly important film in terms of my own introspection. So I thank the film very much for that. Yes, the other incredibly important point that I want to make, which is revealed again in this book, is that the film is in Japanese, and the film is a mixture of we have image and we have out of sync audio. That is clips of interviews, of audio, spoken words by people who are sometimes seen on camera, who are also sometimes not seen on camera. And so we get a lot of audio from, for example, Mr. Yokota or Mr. Yokotsuka in their own words. And this is very important because Mr. Hara says in the book that this is a film that's in Japanese that was shown without any subtitles. In other words, there are no Japanese subtitles because sometimes if the ear is not properly attuned to the speech patterns, then sometimes it can take for at least for me, I admit, there is an effort that I need to make in order to attune my ear to be able to then, therefore, understand what is being said in full. And, I admit that. So I find that to be a very important thing that I have to do. And this is very important because I think Mr. Hara is making a great point here, which is, we have to do some work when we watch this film. We have to train our ears. We have to get used to this. And that's a terrible way of putting it, get used to it. But I don't mean it that way. What I mean is because I don't have the personal experience of this kind of situation. And so I am not always going to understand everything that's being said. And I apologize for that. But I think that's the point. I think the point is, Mr. Hara is expecting me, therefore, to basically keep up and to do the work and to really listen And by making the effort to listen, I think that is in itself a means by which I can get one step closer to understanding what the situation is. Therefore, I think the act of having this film without any subtitles in Japanese is extraordinary. Now, Mr. Hara does explain, of course, that when the film was shown, there would always be a written transcript or some kind of written explanation of what was going on. And so that would always be helpful for people in the audience. And for me, I have the booklet here, which is from the Facets DVD, and I also have this book. So that helped me afterwards to gain a better appreciation of the fullness of the situations. But I think this is a very important point that could be lost if one is to watch this film in English subtitles, because, of course, without the English subtitles, there would be no way for someone who is not familiar with the Japanese language to understand what is going on. So, of course, you're going to have to watch the film with English subtitles or other subtitles in your language, which if it is not Japanese. But I think the point here is that the intention was always to have the film without subtitles, so that would make a viewer like me have to work and thus have to bring myself one step closer, or perhaps more than one step closer to the film, which I think is a bold choice, and it is someone who knows exactly how to reach the viewer through the medium of cinema. And I should say that as well as a kind of closer to this discussion of mine. This film, I think I was thinking about what I was going to say about this film. And one of the things I was planning to say was I was going to say that this is a film that shows the power of cinema and documentary film, because it's a film that brings us to the focus of these particular gentlemen. And therefore it is a brave film for showing focus, and it is therefore a film that shows the power of cinema, because without it we would not, or at least I would not, have known about this particular situation. That's what I was going to say, but I thought about that comment, and I thought that is probably not the best comment to make. And it's, the more I think about it, the more I find that such a comment that I would have made, I think, would have been very incomplete, and perhaps would have shown or indicated a real shallowness. Because I think to say that the film is it's something that shows the power of cinema, I think is only part of the equation. It is very powerful, don't get me wrong. It is a film that goes at the very heart of what these gentlemen are going through. And I admire the film greatly for it. But at the same time, it is very brave in basically showing the the shortcomings of this kind of film, and the idea of the camera and Hara's camera can be at once enlightening but also intrusive, and also it shows that perhaps there is no attention that would be given to these people had the camera not been there. Now, I don't want to be that cynical, but I think, and I go back to the moment that Hara describes with Mr. Yokota and the poetry in Shinjuku. Had the camera not been there, would the people really have stood around and watched Mr. Yokota as he tried to read his poetry? I don't know. I really can't tell. But I could guess that perhaps Mr. Hara could have been right. In which case, that also is an indication of the real paradox of this kind of film, which is, on the one hand, it shows us an intimate portrayal of these gentlemen like Mr. Yokota and Mr. Yokotsuka. But on the other hand, it does say that without a film like this, would I have given any notice to this situation? Would anyone have given any notice to this situation? again, the cynical side of me is something that I don't want to consider because it's something that is very disturbing to me. And so I'd like to try to be as optimistic as possible and say it would have been considered nonetheless. But again, I can't be sure. And that is what makes this film complex and complicated and rich, because I'm sitting here and I am still struggling. And I think that is a mark of just a crucial, important film. And that is, in essence, why I think Kazuo Hara is a filmmaker that you should know about. I urge you, please, please go out and watch any film that you can by Mr. Kazuo Hara. If you want to start with Goodbye CP, Sayonara CP, please do so. And please try to watch it with an honest eye, with a caring eye, but with an eye that it can be both critical and self-critical. And please, please let the film let you ask questions of the film and of yourself. And maybe the answers that you come up with will be different than mine. Hopefully, I hope they will be different than the answers that I've come up with for me in my own personal situation. I think for me, though, by reaching these answers, I think perhaps this is an indication that I'd like to think that I am maybe one step closer to being perhaps a better person. But who knows? I want to maintain as much optimism as possible. But I think films like this are therefore very crucial to my own education. And I don't mean just film education, but I mean education as a human being. So let me end it there. And I just want to say that this film is one of the, it's one that really should be seen by as many people as possible. Now, of course, let me just end also with some comments that Kazuo Hara made. You know, this is a film that's depicting 1970s, early 1970s Japan. And so perhaps, and I think Mr. Hara makes this point very well, and, Japan from the early 1970s is probably a little different than contemporary Japan, because there were noticeably little, if any, facilities that were designed to assist the handicapped or the disabled. So there were no, there was essentially nothing there in society that's depicted here that has those sorts of things, right? Which I think makes today a little bit different. And there's perhaps, I'd like to say that there is a little bit more awareness. There is more of an effort to try to provide facilities and public transportation and also train stations and the like, and public areas are. We'd like to think that they are being equipped more with certain structures and certain maybe facilities that will help people who are disabled or who are handicapped to better be able to take advantage of public transportation or other public utilities and facilities and the like. So I'd like to think that there have been improvements to Japan society since the Japan of the early 1970s. And I think Mr. Hara acknowledges that point in this book rather eloquently. So there is some room for optimism, I think. But at the same time, this is a film that should not be seen wholly through the lens of saccharine, sugary sweetness. It should be seen, as I said, with a very caring eye, a very honest eye, and a very critical and self-critical one. So, and that, therefore, for me, is the mark of something that is truly important and remarkable and outstanding. Goodbye CP is an outstanding work. Okay, my friends, let me end it there. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I really, again, can't stress enough how much I want you to know more about the works of Kazuo Hara. And so hopefully I will try to do some more videos talking about his works, because I think they are so important, and they really they disturb me. And I say the word disturb with a special meaning, because I mean that in a way that it really makes me, it forces me to think about the world and think about myself in a new way. And I feel that every time I see a work by Mr. Kazuo Hara. And therefore, I cherish his work immensely. So I hope that you might be able to discover Mr. Kazuo Hara for yourself. And as I say, these works, many of his works, are available in these DVDs, which have been released in North America and with English subtitles. And this DVD happens to be region or all zone NTSC DVD. And so if you are able to play a DVD, it is all zone NTSC, so at least according to the back of the box. So I hope that is helpful to you. And of course, there's this book as well, which I also recommend highly. So, okay, my friends, let me end it there, and I will see you again very soon. In the meantime, please be happy and healthy and well. And please, please, please keep on watching a lot of great cinema. Until we meet again, my friends. Cheers.